Okay, in this video, we're going to take things further by setting up a control rig for our character.
That's right. We're going to add sort of an extra part to the animation here, because technically everything that we want to animate for our scene is pretty much finished.
Yeah.
And we got our ball squashing, stretching, bouncing. Yeah, if you want to play through it real quick.
Sure, yeah. Let me go ahead and hide the curtains real quick.
Sure.
Bear with me. And I'm going to go ahead and hide our new curtain deflector as well. And,
so you just added that to the wall and curtains layer?
Exactly.
Cool.
So now let's go ahead and check out our ball's animation. See what he's doing exactly. Wow, that was quick. He's really
switch
fast.
Off real time.
Yeah, we had left that on before, as you guys might have done.
Switch on real time. Anyway.
Yeah.
So we go, wait for a sec, and then boing, boing,
yep.
boing.
He's got that nice stretch and squash.
Yeah, everything's looking really good. What we want to do, though, is just kind of as an extra, as a bonus, we're going to set up a more advanced technique for animating the squash and stretch of the ball using a custom control rig.
Right, we're going to automate that stretch.
That's right. The ball will automatically stretch as he goes up into the air, but on top of that, we're still going to leave manual control so that we as the animator can override that stretch and add or subtract as we see fit.
That's right. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to set up a reaction so that when he goes upwards in Z, he'll automatically stretch, and when he goes down towards the floor, he'll automatically squash.
That's right, and we're going to set it up in such a way so that while it's doing that, we can still make minor edits if we need them.
Right. So first things first, let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and set up our custom attribute so that we can override that automatic stretch.
That's right. Now we're going to build this in a manner that might seem a little bit backwards. We're actually going to set up our manual stretchability first, and then after we get that in place and working, we're going to then add on our automatic stretch.
Sounds good. So I'll put on my attribute holder. I'll go to animation. And I'll go to my parameter editor, and I'm going to go ahead and set up this manual stretch attribute.
Okay. So notice he's using a float, a spinner, and he's giving it a range of -10 to +10. So he's kind of establishing his own range of values that don't necessarily exactly coincide with what's going on with the stretch modifier.
That's right. I'll go and click Add. We have it down there. Looks good. So now I'm going to go ahead and go into our curve editor. And first thing we need to do is notice that since we did key our stretch before, we're just going to go ahead and delete out that stretched animation.
Okay.
So go over to the ball, the modified object, go down to our stretch attribute, and then I'll go down to the stretch magnitude.
Now again, before you delete this out, I do want to just kind of reiterate, we are doing this rig as kind of an added bonus.
Right.
And you don't necessarily have to follow along, but this is a really cool way to approach animation in such a way where a lot of parts of it are automated for you, so you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, too.
Yeah.
So I've got all the keys selected. I'm just going to hit the delete key, wipe those out.
Okay.
So now if I play back...
We're no longer stretching at all.
Right, he's bending, but he's not stretching. So next things to do is I'm going to go ahead and basically turn this controller into a list controller.
That's right. We're going to add a new controller to our stretch attribute. Right now it's plugged into a Bezier float, which is what gave us our animation curve. What we're going to do is apply a list to it. Now, we haven't really talked about lists yet, but they're very simple. So instead of dedicating an entire video to them, we're just going to show them to you, and I'll kind of discuss what's going on. Go ahead and apply a list real quick, and then I'll give a description.
So I have the initial controller highlighted. I'm going to right-click, go to Assign Controller, and I'll select a float list.
Now look at what happened right now. Before you do anything, take a look right next to the stretch attribute. We now see a plus sign.
Right.
If you click that, you'll notice that stretch is now listening to two things. It's listening to our original Bezier float, which was there before.
Right.
And a new track called available. Now this is the heart of a list controller, and there are several different types of lists. We'll be exploring those a little more in depth a little bit later as we get further into controllers. But the idea is that you can stack up multiple controllers in an additive fashion. We can have a Bezier float like we have now. Under this, we could put like maybe a waveform and combine the two. You can put as many controllers as you want into a list. In fact, as soon as you add a controller into here, for example, go ahead and stick in a waveform controller just as an example.
Sure. I'll click Assign Controller, Waveform Float, click OK.
And the default settings, I'm sure, will be just fine.
Sure.
This is just for an example. Notice a new available track appears underneath underneath the waveform that we just added.
Right.
So we could continue adding more and more controllers into this list to get the final result we're chasing.
And what's cool is that Max will automatically kind of add up the animations of these controllers.
Exactly. So if you were to hit play right now, you'll notice,
wow, that's quite a stretch there.
That's right, because we have this...
stretching from 0 to 100. Yeah,
that's
crazy.
Right.
I can actually go
and change that real quick.
Properties.
Go to the properties.
Yep. And I can just bring our amplitude down to like
1.
1 works great.
Yeah. So now if you rewind and hit play, he's just constantly doing that no matter what.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Now then, on top of that also, we could, come in here, we could select the available, we could assign a new controller, like maybe a noise or whatnot. Now, we're not going to do that, but the point is, if we were to add anything else, we'd get a new available track, and a new available track. The idea of a list is that you can just stack in multiple controllers and basically listen to them all, add them all together, and see the result right here inside your viewport.
Yeah, very cool and handy.
Right. So what we're going to do, we're not going to use a waveform float for obvious reasons, because it just gives us this really weird wah-wah-wah kind of effect. What we're going to do is use what?
We're going to use a float reaction, because we are actually going to set up a reaction. The driver is going to be our custom attribute. Right. The manual stretch, if you will, and then it'll actually be driving the stretch attribute in our stretch modifier on our character.
Gotcha. So go ahead and overwrite that waveform controller with a float reaction. And check this out. As soon as you add a float reaction, you will notice that the reaction manager pops up.
Right.
Before, we were actually pulling the reaction manager up on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another way to get to it. When you do it this way, though, take a look down in your reactions. We have a new one called unassigned.
Right.
So it's kind of like set aside a place for the reaction we want to create, but we still need to do all the work. We need to assign our master, assign our slave, and so forth.
That's right. So basically we have this reaction set up, but there's no master driving it right now. So let's go ahead and replace this unassigned placeholder with an actual master.
Okay.
So I'll hit right-click, replace master. Now I'm actually going to choose that custom attribute that we had just set up.
Okay.
I'll be going to Talented Ball, Modified Object, Custom Attribute, Manual Stretch.
Cool.
We have our first state set up. That's looking good. And now we're going to go ahead and just create another new state. We're actually going to go back and edit these states manually.
Well, there's nothing to really adjust in the viewport this time.
That's right.
So we technically have to go and do this by number. Now, if you're confused, remember that whatever number comes out of this float reaction inside of our reaction manager, it's going to be sent up to our stretch value.
Right.
That's the whole heart of what's going on here. Because, before we've been using the reaction manager with, usually 2 separate attributes and 2 separate objects. Here we don't really have that luxury. We're doing this all internally with just numbers, and the final number that is produced is sent back out to our stretch to squash or stretch the ball.
That's right. So now we'll just go ahead and create our second state. And now we can actually go and adjust the values of our master and of our slave for the reaction.
Okay.
So basically, our manual stretch is going to go from -10 to 10. I'll go ahead and put those in there.
Okay.
-10.
So if if the manual stretch attribute is at -10, then what are we going to set the stretch value to?
Sure. Well, we'll set it to -1.
Okay.
And you can actually see it pop right there in the viewport. And then when we're at our maximum value for a custom attribute, we want the stretch to be at a value of 1.
Now notice, he never really went into create mode to make this happen.
Right.
All he did was just come in here and change some numbers. Create mode is going to allow you to adjust values inside the viewport. We're not doing that. We have to change everything numerically because we don't really have anything we can manually adjust like that.
That's right. Now let's go ahead and test this out and make sure it worked okay.
Okay.
I'm just going to minimize this, but I won't hide it for now because we're going to need it in a little bit.
Okay.
So now we have our custom attribute manual stretch.
Yep.
And it's working great. We can now control our stretch without having to go down into the stretch modifier. We can do it right here from this handy attribute that's kind of sitting at the top.
That's right. Now, this will actually become even more handy for later on because we can add even more attributes to this. Like, say, we wanted to add a custom attribute for maybe bending. So that, once we get up on the stool, if we want to be able to control further bends to give him some cool animation like he's dancing or whatnot.
That's right.
We can put all of those controls here on this custom attribute holder, and we can wire them up in basically the similar fashion we've been using here.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's continue from here. We've got our new controls for our manual stretch.
Right, now it's time to set up our auto stretch.
That's right.
Which is very cool. So I'm going to go through the same workflow. I'm just going to choose this placeholder track, if you will.
Our next available track.
Yeah, I'm going to right-click, go to Assign Controller, and I'll give it another float reaction.
So we're actually going to be running 2 separate float reactions here. And remember, the nature of these guys is that they will become additive. They'll start stacking up on each other.
Exactly. So now I'm going to assign a master to this reaction, replace master.
Now, a quick thing before you get too much further into this.
Mm-hmm.
I do notice one thing about the reaction manager. You know, when you're looking at it, every single reaction you've made so far in your scene is visible. They start to kind of add up. They can get a little confusing at times. How can you fix this?
Well, that's actually pretty easy. I'm just going to undo this replace master command here.
Okay.
And let's say we only want to look at this one reaction that we're currently working on. We want to hide all the other ones.
Right.
Just hit this show selected button up here.
Very
Very
nice.
easy. So now I'll go ahead and replace master. Now I'm actually going to choose the Z direction of our ball's bounce as the driving force or the driving attribute in this reaction. Transform, position, Z position.
Okay.
Great. And now I'm actually going to do the same thing where we adjust our values manually. But before that, I actually want to create our second state. Kind of set it up, and kind of
intuitively in the
yes.
viewport.
Sorry, getting a little tongue tied there.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do now is actually what I want is I want the ball's apex to define the actual stretched out.
That's
position,
right. The highest point of its bounce.
Right. So in order to do that, we're actually going to turn on create mode for a little bit, drag the time slider to the apex of the bounce, which is about 57, and then we'll create our second state.
Okay.
And you can see it automatically said, that's, almost 18. And of course we could manually adjust that value, but why do it when we already have it set up in the viewport for us?
Exactly. The Z translation has already been animated, so we don't have to actually go and change that value. It changes over time.
That's right.
All we need to do is adjust the time slider.
So now I could turn off create mode, and now I can actually say, okay, for this value of about 18, let's give it a stretch of about 0.3. So see how that looks. That looks
nice.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
So now we'll go back down to where the Z value is 0 when he's sitting on the floor, and for that we want a squash. So we're going to set our squash value to negative 0.2. Oh, my mistake. I was actually doing the wrong value there. One down, Bill. Very good. Negative 0.2.
Gotcha.
And there you go. So now when he's at a state of 0, sitting on the floor, the squash, or the stretch, is going to be negative 0.2.
Nice.
So now I'm going to go ahead and undo show selected, close the reaction manager, close the curve editor, and let's see how this looks. Very cool.
Looking cool. There's only one minor catch, and it's now that he's on the stool, notice he's still remaining in a stretch position.
Yep. And that's actually very easy to fix now that we have our manual stretch parameter that we can actually key any way we want to. So now, in order to do that, very easy. I'm just going to go right to the point where he hits the stool.
Okay.
Actually, right before he hits the stool.
All right.
And we have auto key turned on. And I'm just going to anchor our manual stretch right here.
So like a down-up action?
Yep.
I love that.
And now I'll go down to where he actually hits the stool, like boom. And I'm going to give him a little bit of squash.
Okay.
That looks good. And then maybe I'll actually go up a few keys.
A few frames.
Exactly, a few frames.
Yeah.
There you go.
I do
and
that
then,
all the time.
keyframe. And we'll give him a little bit of a wobble action, so he'll actually be stretching out, kind of reacting from his squash.
Gotcha.
A few more, and then bring it down a little bit more. And then one more, and we'll zero him out. Turn off auto key, and let's see how that looks. Boing. Cool.
Very nice. And there's only one last thing that I wouldn't mind making a minor adjustment to.
Sure.
And that is the curve of our automatic bounce. Because, I'm noticing as we're bouncing here, we've got kind of a linear change in the bounce.
Right.
It's like you can actually kind of see it if you watch.
Yeah, starts to deform before he hits the ground. Well, that's actually very easy to do. We could just open up our reaction manager and we could edit that curve.
Absolutely. It's not even really... When he comes into the ground, it's okay because he's still pretty much got his ball shape.
Yeah.
But it's like here, you'll notice he's on the ground. We're kind of losing a bit of our squash.
Sure.
So we can kind of we can adjust the curve to get a little more of that because right now everything looks okay. But we could maybe squash him a little bit more on the ground. Also, like as he goes up, we could make him pop into that stretch a little bit more quickly.
Okay.
And it's so easy to do this using our animation curves.
Exactly. So we'll go back into the reaction manager. We're going to go back down into that auto stretch.
Which in this case is our last reaction.
Right, exactly. And just by clicking on it, see how it automatically framed up in the curve editor down here. Very handy. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on this key, turn it into a beige corner. And now
Gives
we
us
can
our
actually,
tangent handle.
we can actually play with our adjustment here.
Nice.
So,
now he's actually starting to squash a little bit on the ground.
Exactly. And he's still stretched up, which kind of makes sense because he's going to hold that stretch a little bit more.
It also means that as he leaves the ground and goes back up into the air, he's going to stretch up a little bit quicker.
Right.
So all with one really fast adjustment of a tangent handle, we've made our animation look miles better.
Yeah, looks very good. And also, you notice that, again, this is kind of like a fast out. We're actually exiting this key kind of quickly.
Very quickly.
Faster than linear, which is the way it was before. And that's how you get more of a squash here and then a quicker stretch as he's kind of like bouncing out more quickly.
That's right. Okay, now with that, I think there's only one last adjustment that I want to make. And
Sure.
I know it's kind of a matter of preference, but like this last jump, it'd be cool if he like stretched out just a little bit more.
Okay.
So what we can do is we can come back over to our manual stretch, which right now has been anchored to stay at 0.
Right.
So we could probably just set like another anchor to it, like right about, let's see. Let's turn on auto key real quick, make sure that we're animating. So let's say right about here, we'll just go ahead and anchor it again. So boom, boom, a new anchor. So
Sure.
We're no longer anchoring here. We'll go back to that here in just a second. And we'll, I guess right about there's the apex. We can just add a little bit of oomph to it.
Sure.
So that last jump is just a little bit higher stretch.
Very cool.
And then, because we still have these further keyframes, it'll actually reduce itself right back down to 0 and keep everything in place.
That's what's great about this rig, is that we have automated our squash and stretch, but yet we still have the ability to come back and tweak it wherever we want to.
These little tiny, really cool tweaks. Now, let's see. The last thing is this very last keyframe we have on manual. Let's go ahead and compensate by pulling him back down into a ball shape.
Sure.
So there we go, and wow, wow, wow. So
nice.
There we go.
Yeah.
And with that, we have animated all of our bouncing ball using our new rig. And
why don't we go ahead and do one more play with the curtains added and everything.
Sure. Absolutely.
Turn off auto key, rewind, bring up the layer manager, unhide the wall and curtains, unfreeze the floor and stage props, and hide the layer manager again. I'm going to go ahead and kind of frame up our camera a little bit better.
Yeah.
And, okay, it's showtime. Action. Bing. Woohoo.
Nice.
Looks good.
Yeah, you could probably go in there and adjust that wobble a little bit, but that's okay. On our
end, you can add a
work.
few more keys to the wobble if you want to.
Sure. You have all sorts of fun. But remember, as part of the assignment that goes along with this class, and even for those of you that may not necessarily be taking part in the class, this is a nice assignment for you, too, to just kind of do on your own.
Yeah, to kind of practice what you learn.
After you get the ball up on the stage, make him do something.
Right.
And he doesn't have to stay on the little stool. I mean, you can make him bounce around. You can bring in new objects. Use your imagination.
You have a whole chorus of balls dancing and singing if you want to.
You could, if you just really, really wanted to. I wouldn't be all that impressed. But anyways,
it's hard to impress Zach.
That's gonna wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.